Hey hockey card fans and hockey fans in general, welcome back to the channel. I went back to Heroes Cards and Comics and picked up some more hockey cards from the 1974 O-PEE-CHEE set. So these are the 73-74 stat year. See, they have all these hockey card sets down there. This is where I get my hockey cards. I was working on the 74-78 box. This is pretty cool. They got football. Okay, I need that one.
That would be the first place I'd check out. We'll do that tomorrow.
Okay.
On the left side.
Yeah, like the one yeah, I know.
All sorts of stuff. Comic books, Lego. So these are from the Philadelphia Flyers' first Stanley Cup victory. And whenever I go to Heroes Cards and Comics, I get a big box full, and I can usually pick the best quality. And most of these are just common cards. The high expensive end cards are like Bob Gainey's were $200. They're in cabinets somewhere else, if they have them at all. But anyway, let's get on with this. So the first one I got is a rookie card from the Atlanta Flames, Tom Lysiak. Most of these cards are in really good shape. There's a couple with dings in the corners and a couple of creases on some that I didn't see when I first picked them. But Tom Lysiak was a really good player. He was picked in second overall, first round by the Atlanta Flames in the 73 draft. Excellent player. He had a couple of 30-goal years with the Atlanta Flames. His best, he had 82 points. Playoff success eluded him. He was part of a huge trade in 1979 with the Chicago Blackhawks, where he was traded from Atlanta with Greg Fox, Harold Filipov, and Pat Ribble and Miles Zaharko to Chicago Blackhawks for Ivan Boldyrev, Darcy Rota, and Phil Russell. So Chicago got Lysiak and Greg Fox for Boldyrev, Russell, and Rota. Hard to say who won that trade because I would have to go with Chicago because Lysiak and Fox were part of their team, while Boldyrev was traded later to the Vancouver Canucks, and Phil Russell eventually found his way with the New Jersey Devils. Buffalo Sabres center Don Luce. Actually a very ugly picture of the guy. He looks like he got a slice across his face there. That's just the shadow and maybe his hair. He actually started his career with the New York Rangers. Round 3, 14th overall pick in the 1966 draft when there was only 6 teams. So played 2 seasons with the Rangers, only played like 21 games. Then went to the Detroit Red Wings, didn't do much there, before finally going to the Buffalo Sabres, probably in the expansion draft, I imagine. And he stayed there right up until 80-81 when he went to Los Angeles and then spent part of a season with the Leafs. But when he was with the Sabres, he went to one Stanley Cup final, was a really good player, second line guy. He was also on the penalty kill. He had a lot of shorthanded goals for them. There's St. Louis Blues defenseman Don Ari. This guy had been traded a lot of times in his career. Always in demand. He had been a Boston Bruin for most of his career. Won 2 Stanley Cups with the Bruins. Then went to St. Louis. That was with Montreal Canadiens. Then the Pittsburgh Penguins, New York Rangers, and Colorado Rockies. So he was with the Blues this year in 74, but then in 74-75 he got traded to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Chuck Leafley. Doesn't say anything else about his other trades. Now we have Detroit Red Wings team leaders with Mickey Redmond, Marcel Dionne again, and Bill Hogaboom. Hogaboom was a rookie that year. Mickey Redmond scored 51 goals. Marcel Dionne had 54 assists for 78 points. I think this was Dionne's last year in Detroit before going to LA. He just wanted out. The team wasn't winning very much, so he wanted out. Yeah, Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Ed Van Impe, one of the key pieces of their defense. Won 2 cups with the Flyers. Then he was traded to Pittsburgh in '76. I have that card. And he was traded with Bobby Taylor to Pittsburgh Penguins for Gary Innes, so a goalie. Taylor was a goalie and Innes were goalies. It was a swap, but Ed Van Impe. And Van Impe would play. Didn't play very much. I would say Philly won that deal because Van Impe only played 22 more games. Bobby Taylor didn't play any games for Pitt. And Gary Innes would go on to play for the Washington Capitals. He spent more time in the minors. All right, next up we have Atlanta Flames defenseman Randy Mannery. Not a pretty looking guy, that's for sure. He'd played for Detroit before coming to Atlanta and then went to the LA Kings. I have his LA Kings cards. All right, moving on, we have St. Louis Blues defenseman Barclay Plager, one of the Plager brothers. There's 3 Plager brothers. They all played defense for the St. Louis Blues, and that's one of them. He is a captain. He spent most of his career in the minors until being picked in the expansion draft by the Blues. And he spent the rest of his career with the Blues. He went to 3 Stanley Cup finals, but they couldn't win it. Now we have another rookie card. Left winger Inge Hammerstrom, Toronto Maple Leafs. One of the Swedish players that came across in the 70s. Swedish players were finally starting to make their presence known. He played only 5 years with the Leafs, or four full seasons with the Leafs, and then 2 years in St. Louis. He was traded from Toronto to St. Louis on November 1st, 1977 for Jerry Butler. I'm going to say the Leafs won that deal because they later traded Butler to Vancouver as part of the Rick Vaive Bill Derlego trade. It was Jerry Butler and Dave Tiger Williams for Vaive and Derlego. I think Toronto won that deal. Next up, we have a defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Ab DeMarco. He just got traded from St. Louis to Pittsburgh, so he's got a terrible airbrush. So he was traded from the St. Louis Blues with Steve Durbano and J. Bob Kelly to Pittsburgh Penguins for Craig Poulos and Brian Watson. Not sure if that's a great trade or not. Didn't have a very big career. He only scored he played 344 games. Up next we have Minnesota North Stars left winger J.P. Parise. This card is in terrible shape. I didn't realize how bad it was on the back. I saw the front. There was only 2 of these cards, so I picked that one without even realizing. Bad mistake on my part. I played for the Boston Bruins, Toronto Maple Leafs, then went to Minnesota in the expansion draft era, and then was traded to New York Islanders, and then 70-80 went to the Cleveland Barons, and then when they merged into the back to the Minnesota North Stars. So not much special there. Then we have another rookie card, so to speak. We have Los Angeles Kings team leaders. Butch Goring had 28 goals. Frank St. Marcel had 36 assists, but Butch Goring had 61 points. Don Kozak is the rookie. He had a scoring percentage of 19.2. And next, we have center, Buffalo Sabres captain of that, Jerry Meehan. Meehan was part of the expansion draft. He'd been with Philly and Toronto. Then he went to Vancouver, Atlanta, Washington, where I have some of his cards. Spent 2 games with the Cincinnati Stingers. Not a bad player with Buffalo. Now, I did make one mistake here, and I got Washington Capitals goalie Ron Lowe. He's in his Toronto uniform. He got picked in the expansion draft. I already have this card. When I was going through, I had a list, but Ron Lowe's name was... Couldn't really tell if it was scratched out or not, like markered out with yellow. It didn't look like it was highlighted enough, so I bought this one. I shouldn't have. Should have waited, but oh well. Just one card. For all these cards, I only paid $44, and I got some hard plastic sleeves on top of that, so not bad. Another rookie card here. We got defenseman for the New York Islanders, Jean Potvin. His brother Dennis was the Hall of Famer. Jean was not. He actually started his career with the LA Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers, but then went to the Islanders in 72-73. But then got traded to the Barons, Minnesota, and then went back to the New York Islanders. He didn't play enough games to get a Stanley Cup ring. Though he might be engraved. 80 and 81, he played 32 games in 80, but no playoff games. So he should have been on a Stanley Cup team. And then 81, he played 18 games, but no appearances in the playoffs. So his name might be on the cup. I'm not sure. You know, defenseman, New York Rangers, Rod Sealing. Started his career in Toronto and picked up by the Rangers. Was an all-star with the Rangers. Went to the 72 Summit Series as a defenseman. 75, he played for the Rangers, Capitals, and Leafs all in the same year. Went to the Blues, went to the Flames. I have his card I have a lot of his cards. We got a coach for the Vancouver Canucks, Phil Maloney. I already have this card as a Topps card. But I don't want Topps. I want O-PEE-CHEE as much as possible. So this is a rookie card. He had played in the 50s with the Boston Bruins and Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the Blackhawks. But as a coach, he was pretty bad. He only lasted 1 year, 37 games. He was 15, 8, and 4. So he was a mid-season replacement and didn't get extended. Kind of surprised he didn't get extended. You know, with Vancouver at that time, that's not a bad record. Washington Capitals left winger Denny Duperre. He was picked in the expansion draft from the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he had spent 3.5 seasons. He actually was with the Washington Capitals, then traded to the St. Louis Blues. Then he played for the Kansas City Scouts, Colorado Rockies. So he didn't play on any good teams. I have his card when he played for Colorado and when he played for KC. Next up, we have one of the bad boys of the league. Defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Steve Durbano. If you remember, we already talked about the trade with Ab DeMarco, and Steve Durbano was another part of that trade. If you want, go on YouTube and watch Steve Durbano versus Kevin Morrison in the WHA. It's quite the fight. Durbano was acting like an ass trying to get at Morrison, who was in the penalty box, and Morrison finally had enough and just laid him out one punch. Durbano was a troubled guy. He could have right at a slap shot. Now we have the next one. From the St. Louis Blues, we have Bob Plager. You notice he's got a captaincy as well. Both him and his brother Barclay were 2 captains on the team. I don't know how that works, but they did it. Bob Plager started his career with the Rangers, and then spent the rest of his career with the Blues. Up until 70, he even coached the Blues in 1992-93 with 11 games with a 4-6-1 record. Never got another chance. Vancouver Canucks center Chris Oldleifson. This is also a rookie card. I have quite a few of his other cards. Oldleifson had started with the Boston Bruins, then went to Vancouver, where he finished his career in 80-81, just before they went to the finals. He was actually part of the California Golden Seals farm system, and him and Rich LeDuc were traded to Boston Bruins for Ivan Boldarev. So Boston got Ivan Boldarev for this guy. Big mistake on Boston's part. Boldarev was a really good player. Then he was traded from Boston Bruins with the rights to Mike Walton and Fred O'Donnell to Vancouver for Bobby Schmantz. Bobby Schmantz was a really good player, but Mike Shaky Walton was a pretty good player too. Interesting. Then we have California Golden Seals defenseman Jim Nielsen. Been a long time New York Rangers. Then he went to the Seals, the Cleveland Barons, and finally ended his career with the Edmonton Oilers of the WHA. Played with Wayne Gretzky. Right winger for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Jean Pronovost. The second player in Pittsburgh Penguins history to score 50 goals. Pierre LaRouche beat him in the 50-goal department, I believe. But they did in the same year. So LaRouche did it first and then Pronovost. They had 2 50-goal scorers, but couldn't do it in the playoffs. So in 76, he scored 52 goals. He had scored 40 on 3 other occasions with the Pittsburgh. Got traded to Atlanta. Spent 2 years in Atlanta, then spent 1 full season in Washington before finally hanging up in 82 after 10 games. He didn't do bad in Washington either. I have his last card with Washington, and his Atlanta cards. He'd also been part of the Boston Bruins farm system. God, they let a lot of good players go. Boston did. Now we got a goalie for the Kansas City Scouts, Michel Placé. I have quite a few of his other cards too. Michel Plessis started his career with Montreal. Only played 15 games that year. Picked up in the expansion draft. He was actually a number 1 draft pick by the Montreal Canadiens in the 68 amateur draft. I think he was one of the few times that Montreal used their special priority for French Canadian players. I think that's one of the few times they used it. And it's not like he wasn't exactly a great goalie. 32 games in Montreal, then he played 24 with the Kansas City Scouts, then was traded halfway to Pittsburgh, where he played 2 seasons. Colorado Rockies. Played three full seasons with the Rockies. Was in Colorado for 79-80 again, minor leagues. Then he was in Quebec, where he was the main goalie for 1 year. Had 2 NHL shutouts with Pittsburgh. And his best year was with Pittsburgh when he was a .346 goals against average. That's not right. In 17 games in Montreal, he had a .258. But as a main goalie, he was on a lot of bad teams. Poor guy. Then we have center for the LA Kings, Juha Whiting, or Whitey as they called him. He was one of the first Finnish-born players to ever play in the NHL. Played with the LA Kings. Started his career with the Rangers, then went to the LA Kings, and finally ended with the Cleveland Barons and Edmonton Oilers. Next up, we have the St. Louis Blues goalie, Ed Johnson. Ed Johnson is listed as card 265, but when you go to Hockey DB, he's not even there. He's listed as Tommy Bergman is listed as that card. So it's an error by Hockey DB. Tommy Bergman had gone to the W, so I don't know if he even gets a card that year. Or they might have 2 cards with this number of 265. So interesting to see. Ed Johnson won 2 Stanley Cups with the Boston Bruins, then got traded around. Played with the Leafs, the Blues, and the Rangers. Now we have left winger for the Boston Bruins, Dave Forbes. This is also his rookie card. I have his card when he played for the Washington Caps. Didn't last long in Boston. Played a season in 2 games with Washington before going down to the Cincinnati Stingers for a year. So he wasn't exactly a household name. Right winger, Buffalo Sabres, Rick Dudley. Dudley do right. He actually played 3 seasons with Buffalo. Went to a Stanley Cup final with them. But then he went to the Cincinnati Stingers, the W. He went for more money, kind of. Played 4 full seasons with the Cincinnati Stingers. I actually have his WHA cards. Then he came back to Buffalo for 3 seasons. And then went to the Winnipeg Jets. He actually coached Buffalo from 89 to 92. Didn't have a bad coaching record. 45, 27, 8, 31, 30, 19, 9, 15, and 4 before getting fired. Then he came back and coached the Florida Panthers for half a season. 13 wins, 15 losses, 9 ties, and 3 overtime losses in 04. So not bad there. I don't consider him a bad coach. Not a great coach. Moving along, we got left winger for the Chicago Blackhawks, Darcy Rhoda. This is the guy who was traded for Tom Lysiak. Part of that big trade. He was a 20-goal scorer with the Blackhawks for most part. Then he only stayed with the Flames for 57 games between 2 seasons. So he got traded midway through the season with Chicago to Atlanta, and then in the next year from Atlanta to Vancouver. So traded from Chicago Blackhawks with Ivan Boldyrev and Phil Russell. So him and Boldyrev went together. To Atlanta Flames for Greg Fox, Tom Lysiak, Harold Philpott, Pat Ribble, and Miles Zaharko. So he knew that from the Lysiak card. And then not even a year later, so that first trade was March 13th. So trade deadline, Chicago to Atlanta, and then he was traded from Atlanta to Vancouver on February 8th, 1980 with Ivan Boldyrev, so he got traded with Boldyrev twice, to Vancouver Canucks for Don Lever and Brad Smith. The Vancouver Canucks won that trade because Boldyrev was a really good player and Rhoda was a good role player. They both went to a Stanley Cup final with Vancouver. And then the last card I got is goalie, Atlanta Flames, Phil Meyer. Looks kind of goofy in his photo. He'd been with the Montreal Canadiens, where he was there and won a cup. He should have won a cup in 1970, 71, when Ken Dryden stole it. There was Phil Meyer, Rogie Vachon, and Ken Dryden all in net. Ken Dryden came out of nowhere and stole the job from Rogie. Phil Meyer was the backup. He played 30 games that year. It was a 13, 11, and 4. He would have got his name. He would have got a cup or a ring in his name on the cup. Should have. Then got traded to the Atlanta Flames. Also played for the St. Louis Blues, Philadelphia Flyers, and Colorado Rockies. And 5 games in Buffalo. I have his card when he played for Philadelphia. He never got a card playing for Colorado. And I have his cards when he played for St. Louis and other Atlanta cards. What did he get traded for? He was claimed in the expansion draft by Atlanta from Montreal. Then he was traded from Atlanta with Kurt Bennett and Barry Gibbs to St. Louis Blues for Yvonne Belanger, Bob McMillan, and Dick Redmond, and round 2 pick in the 79 draft. I am going to say Atlanta won that deal. Wasn't a bad goalie, not a great goalie. Had 14 shutouts through his entire career. His best season was 74-75. Played 40 games. Had 5 shutouts, 285 average, but was 14, 16, and 10. Atlanta had a decent team in the mid-70s. It just couldn't put it together. And remember, he shared net with Dan Bouchard, who was an actually really good goalie. So there we have it, 28 cards of the 74 O-PEE-CHEE set. I still need about another 84 cards. I'm missing a lot of expensive cards like Bob Orr, Phil Esposito, Bob Gainey, Guy Lafleur. Dennis Potvin is another rookie in that one who should be big. But we'll keep hammering away at this set. I might get all the common cards and then go to another set from Heroes and leave the bigger ones until I can find them cheaper. But we'll see. Any hockey card fans out there, let me know what you guys think of all you hockey card fans out there or hockey fans out there. Go back through the historical hockey trades, NHLhistoricalhockeytrades.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. And tell me which trade that you've heard so far, which one do you think is the most interesting? And we're talking 70s here, not 80s. Which trades do you think were interesting? Do you think it's the Marcel Dion trade, or the Lysiak trade, or maybe the Jean Provost trade? A lot of trades that were really cool back then. Leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, this has been Hockey Night in Belmont.